So we are back with another edition of Ask Us Anything on the podcast. And in this episode today, we're going to tackle 3 real coaching challenges that were presented to us. The first one that I think all of us can relate to all 3 of these, but the first one is where a few of your players, they absolutely live and breathe your sport. They're willing to do anything and everything to be the very best they can be. Maybe you have a group of players that are also committed. Now, this group might be, hey, they'll do whatever you ask. They'll show up when they're told to. They're going to give great effort. But then we also maybe have this other group of players who have other priorities in life and other sports, other interests, and they seem to be simply okay with missing a practice or even potentially a game for grandma's 76th birthday. So, the challenge in all this is, how do you coach a team where varying levels of commitment exist? The second challenge we're going to pack today is one where you're the new coach. Maybe you're new to coaching, or you're new to a certain level. You've moved up a league, or maybe you're new to a new club, a new program, a new team. And you want to build a culture and raise standards. You want to do things better than they have ever been done before. And yet you don't have any proof, or enough proof for the people within that team that your process works. Whether it's at that level, or maybe you've never coached before. So how do you get buy-in without a track record of success? Right? How do you get buy-in without a track record of success when you step into a new coaching job? The third big challenge we're going to pack is when you want to build a team culture, but you have limited time. And maybe it's because you're coaching in the youth sports area, or maybe your availability with your job, or the way that your season's structured, or maybe you're like the rugby coach Andre Pretorius, who was on Coaching Culture episodes 220 and 221 of the pod. I also mentioned his story in the Culture System book. He had to build a team culture, a strong team culture, in the South African Professional Rugby League during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he couldn't do anything with his team on or off the field. So how do you do it with limited time and resources? That's what we're unpacking in today's conversation on the Coaching Culture podcast. So welcome back. Welcome to the podcast, where we're dedicated to help you unlock your leadership potential and create winning team environments. My name is JP Nerbun, and I'm joined by my incredible co-hosts, Betsy Butterick and Nate Sanderson. Each week, we bring you practical tips and strategies to elevate your coaching. For more, explore our online courses and books at tocculture.com and betsybutterick.com. And be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at tocculture.com for weekly culture building insights, as well as the notes to this and every episode of the podcast.
All right, first question we have here. As a first-year head coach, how do you navigate setting new, higher standards and expectations that the kids are not previously used to being held to, especially when you have no previous track record proving it's all worth it? What if some kids and parents don't buy into the standards and expectations because there are no results proving credibility yet? I think that yet piece is really important. This is a big challenge for coaches that take over a program, especially when the culture of the program, the standards or expectations that you as the new coach have for the program, are vastly different from ones that the current players or returning players have experienced previously. A few things come to mind for me off the bat. The first is, tell them it's going to be different. And that sounds very simple. We often miss the mark. We introduce our new standards, our expectations, we explain the why, but we don't actually say, hey, this is going to look and probably feel different than what you're used to. Be transparent in making that admission. Because in making that admission, you are setting their expectations for, okay, it's going to feel different. And then you can double down on the fact that different isn't bad. Different is unpracticed. So this is going to be different than what you've previously experienced. Moving forward, or starting today, we are going to be asking you to do blank, 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 blank. And then you're going to fill in the why. They're still going to have questions. So tell them it's going to be different. Be very clear about what the new expectations are going to be. And then go back to questioning. And what I mean by going back to questioning is, once you've introduced what's going to be new, circle back with both the athletes and the parents and say, given what I've just shared about what's coming, what questions do you have? And this for me is a resistance question. If you can identify the barriers, the current points of resistance, then you can be more intentional either about addressing those in real time or navigating those as they eventually surface in the context of living the new expectations. The other thing that comes to mind for me, and this is from Adam Grant's book, Think Again, is anytime things are going to change, it can be really helpful to tell people what's not going to change. And so if there's anything from the previous way of being in terms of the program that's not going to change, while this is going to look or feel very different, what's not going to change is we're still going to take pride in representing our school, or we're still going to be, very intentional about making sure that we start and end practice time just the way that you're used to. Whatever it happens to be, but telling people it's not going to change can sometimes be a stabilizing force when a lot coming at them is going to look different.
I love that bit there about what's not going to change, because I think sometimes when we try to change everything, we tell everyone that everything was broken, the way that they were doing things, like it just can feel very like attacking. So I think that's a really great point to not change everything. And I think so often, I mean, I think where I would start here as well too would be really understand their purpose, their why. Why did they want to play? What vision do they have for the team? Like, what do they hope to experience? What do they hope to achieve on an individual team level? And then really get into what's underneath that. Like, all right, everyone wants to win a championship here. Great. Okay. What's really important about that for you? Or what's the best part about being a part of this team? What's the most important part, the most meaningful part? I'd really want to get to that meaning and connection so that you can really try to take a collective reasons and whys and then bring those together and to see where there's common theme. Because why should we have to work harder? Like, why would we want to work harder? Like, you have to know where you're headed, why you want to work there. So I think that takes time and effort, but it really is, it's really trying to understand each individual athlete so that you can make these standards and follow those standards more intrinsically motivated. The other big thing I would say is just know who you are as a coach, what type of program you are, and communicate that. Like you said, Betsy, I think there is, if you're going to be more demanding, if I know I came into a lot of environments, I'm going to be more demanding probably than the previous coach, right? That's just probably, but it could be more demanding in a different type of way, right? And it's just being really clear. This is how I'm going to be. This is what's important to me. This is why I'm going to do that. And that I'm probably not for everyone. And that's okay. Right. Like in certain environments, competitive to high performance environments, that needs to just be really clear. Like, we're going to do this. It's going to be different. It's going to be uncomfortable. And you may decide that's not for you. But these are our goals, right? We want to develop resilience or whatever those types of things are. So knowing who you are in all of this, as you set that and making that clear, that could be really helpful as well.
I think, JP, one of the other things I would think about here is sometimes when we are thinking about standards and we come across with a list of like, here are the 8 things that I want my program to be known for, the more we can simplify that into standards that apply to all aspects of the program. So if it is the idea of effort or maximum effort, we can translate that to the weight room. We can translate that even to the film room. We can translate that obviously down to the field or down to the court. So rather than, have 8 different standards in 8 different places, I think starting simply, and then as a coach trying to figure out, okay, if I could only change one thing or 2 things in year 1, what would give us the biggest bang for our buck? What would be the biggest return of investment on that? And really try to get 1 or 2 standards that are ingrained that we don't have to come back to and teach in year 2. That's become part of our way of life. Now maybe we can start to add another one, pick up a 3rd one or 4th one in year 2 and go from there. And hopefully you've experienced, as you said, talking about the why, you experience some benefit from the commitment to those early standards, which then is hopefully has a snowball effect here that players and parents will want to buy into whatever is next, as you're building.
And I think those are great points, Nate. And I want to circle back for a moment, JP, to something that you said about make sure you said knowing who you are as a coach. And in this question's context, I would also advise make yourself known, because you are asking players and parents to buy into something they don't yet have proof is going to work. You're essentially asking them to trust you. So make yourself known, be very transparent in who you are, spend time investing in relationships. And then in addition to setting those expectations, be really clear about support. So yes, I'm going to ask you to do things that might feel challenging or difficult or are requiring more of you. And here's how I am going to support those efforts because I understand that this is different. And also acknowledge there's no proof yet. It's okay to say that. You might know that this works because maybe it's certain elements that you've seen be successful at different levels in your past experience. They don't yet know that. So acknowledging that is absolutely on the table. I know you don't yet know that this is going to be successful. Here's what I promise you. support looks like this, invitation looks like this, and we are going to collaborate throughout this process and make adjustments as best fits our current team now. So be engaged in the process with them so that they feel like they can trust you because they have a partner in that pursuit.
I think what you just said there is really important too. Like just putting out there, hey, I don't have a track record. Like rather, I think coaches try to hide from that and just saying, hey, I know that I'm a first year head coach. I'm going to be learning a lot, right, in this process. But I do know that this is how I want to do it, right? And it may change what it looks like a little bit, but what we know we're going to do is we're going to be, the hardest working, most grateful team. Right? Like that's what's going to be really gratitude and hard work and love for each other. Like those are the things that we're going to be all about, right? Or whatever it is that you're going to focus on. But I love this about just putting it out there that, hey, I don't have a great record. Like just putting it out there that it's that accusation on it.
Well, let's transition to the next question, which is somewhat related here. What are ways to ease in to a culture shift? Taking over a program and I have access to the athletes over the summer. I want to start off on the right track and set the right foundation, but won't be able to have culture meetings or really dive into a lot of the stuff I have planned for the fall. Betsy, JP, either of you want to dive in on this one first?
This is a question I really enjoy. I get it a lot. So, I mean, I'm going to probably go with my textbook answer, which is not my textbook. It's my actual book answer, right? To the culture system. But it's like just this idea when you're taking over a culture. I actually mentioned this on a podcast I was being interviewed on the other day, which is I loved how Monty Williams did this, the Phoenix Suns, when he took over there. A lot of people have said, "Oh, that's they're in a bit of a disarray and the culture is a mess," right? But Monty walked in there and said, "What's working well here?" Right? And he tried it from a place of identifying the good and cultivating the good. I think sometimes we walk in as a coach and we look at all the bad. Right. And people told us the bad. They said, oh, don't take that job because of this, this, and this. Or you go in there and the locker room's a mess. And, the previous coach did all these things. And we look for all the things that are wrong that we're going to come in and fix. I would say, what are all the things that are going well that people appreciate and cultivate that, right? Building a great culture is more like a garden than it is building a house. You're not leveling, knocking the house down and building from the foundation. It's more like, okay, we got some good stuff here. Let's cultivate that. And then yeah, there is an element of where you're going to till and you're going to remove some stuff there. But that, this process of finding what's working, right? And then identifying what needs to change. Yes, we need to have our values. We need to know who we are. We have to have our systems, our ways of doing things, like to build a culture. But so often, the quickest changes to make that will bring out the biggest impact are the ideas that the people will give you. So sit down, do the Captain Mike Abershoff meeting where you sit down with every player and you say, hey, what do you enjoy about playing here? What do you not enjoy? And what's one thing you want to change? And he sat down, Captain Abershoff sat down with every ship on the or every sailor on the ship of the Benfold in 1999. That was 316 sailors, and he did it over 6 weeks. He said, what do you enjoy about working on the ship? What do you not enjoy? And if you were me, what's one thing you would change? And so just sitting down and asking that of the athletes, ask that of the parents, ask that of the administrators, the teachers in the building if you're in a school. Just see what people think needs to be changed. And then if they have a good idea, just action it, right? And just give them credit for that. And so what you'll see is you'll come in there, you'll build a lot of goodwill because you won't be the guy that's coming in there and stinking on all the things that haven't gone well. You'll be saying, hey, there's some really good things here. And then secondly, you're empowering people from day one to start to help be responsible and accountable for the changes that you're making.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the conversation in a slightly different direction because I think you've laid such a great foundation, JP, with the response that you just gave. One of my preferred definitions of culture is a culture is an environment suitable for growth of organisms specifically. So looking more through a scientific lens, without having culture meetings, without having time or ability to share your standards and expectations for athletes in your program, if you think about creating an environment suitable for the growth of organisms, the athletes are the organism. In the limited time that you have with them over the summer, just work on creating the environment. And as you're creating that environment, that container, what's the way of being that you want to embody? What is it that you want them to see and feel and experience in that shared space during that time? Is there any language specifically, any key words that using them intentionally might set the stage or precedent for them receiving them more openly when you have those culture meetings starting in the fall? But for right now, just create the environment, like lean into that aspect of culture. Let those limited actions not be, a shortened version of what you wish you could do, but a really great opportunity to start to be the kind of culture that you would like for them to embody and take on in the future.
Yeah, when I think about this question, if I was thinking about this from like a systems and strategies perspective, I would think, okay, what are the most basic movement shapes or formations that we're going to need to know to be successful in the fall or winter? And then I would start to introduce those, in the summer, and then gradually add and move forward to them. I think there's a similar approach to culture there of once we get to the season, in what way can I till the ground here, so that it's more likely that we can start on step 3 when it comes to working with effort, or what that looks like, or precision, if we're lining up right, or we're in the right spacing on offense or defense. It's not going to be perfect, obviously, in the summer when you're doing it for the first time. But if you can identify, again, the things that are going to have the longest lasting, perhaps the quickest impact, that are maybe the most bite-sized. I don't know what that Venn diagram actually looks like, but that would be something to consider from a cultural perspective. And then just try to make it, work as sort of an introductory, paragraph or two for starting your season in the fall.
And you mentioned gardening, and I'm thinking like there's a garden bed in our backyard from the house that we bought 2 years ago. It is full of weeds. Like there's nothing productive growing in there. And I've been invited to think of like weeds are just plants that are really easy to grow. And so we are having great success with weeds. But thinking about culture and almost a little bit to the previous question about expectations and standards too. If your standards and expectations, your culture pieces are the seeds, and we think of those as the seeds. In order for them to germinate and grow, we need primarily sunshine, water, and fertilizer. Put that in a sports context, like the sunshine is the good, positive, happy things. The rain, the water, oftentimes it might be tears or sweat. And then the fertilizer, you can make the translation there. Those are the things that are really hard, the challenging, the SHIT that we go through together. So really just setting, talk about tilling the ground, Nate. It's like setting the foundation that all of these elements are supporting growth. It doesn't make them good or bad. They're all essential if we hope to experience growth together.
We've got a similar gardening situation going on over in our house here, Betsy. My wife tried to make potatoes last year, didn't work. She threw them out the back end of the compost pile, and all of a sudden we have potatoes growing. So unintentional, gardening here. But no, I think one thing too, I want to double or highlight, not double click on because we don't need to explore anymore, but just highlight is just how you brought into that, Betsy, just how we show up, our presence. I mean, really, honestly, what that does for an environment of just how we walk in the room. Do we embody the values? Like, it's one thing to walk in and say, we're going to build a program on, the values of care and love and effort and gratitude. But do you actually show up, and are you grateful? Are you excited? Like, are you loving? Like you have to embody that. You have to have it, people need to feel that off of you from day one. And I remember hearing, Steve Kerr and Pete Carroll have that conversation where Pete Carroll mentored Steve Kerr on that, And so I think it's simple things that then Steve Kerr said, well, if I want joy, what does that look like? And for him, it looked like music during practice, right? So once you know who you are, it's a lot easier to know what to do. So so many good things there. All right. So the next question is, how do you balance having some athletes who are really committed and their sport is everything to them? Like it's the only sport they play, or it's really just all consuming, they're obsessed with the sport. And then having other athletes who are less committed, they care about things other than their sport and potentially play other sports. And I think you get this in every context. I know some coaches, this question came from a college coach, but some high school coaches will be like, oh, I've got the multi-sport athlete, or, basketball or football or whatever is their second or third sport. And, but we're trying to win a championship here. And then we've got the, college coaches where you've got, players on scholarship, but you've got some player that just works their tail off, does everything right. And then others that have more of a social life. They don't seem as committed. I mean, I can even look at the pro level, and I'm sure there's moments where, when Tom Brady was playing the New England Patriots there, that people were like, man, if everyone was just as disciplined as Tom, like if everyone just worked as hard as Tom and thought about the game like Tom, right? And so I think in every context, we can run into this. For me, I think the challenge for us as coaches is to recognize I like to look at there's potentially three pathways within a program. There is the recreational athlete that is there just to have fun and enjoy themselves. There's the competitive athlete that's looking to compete, looking to win. They're going to, work hard. Maybe they'll do some extra stuff outside of it. Um, but they're not going to make necessarily a lot of lifestyle changes, right? And then I think you have the high performance athlete. You get the performance athlete that is literally going to shape their life around that sport to be at their best, right? And I think it's really about for us as coaches to understand what context we are in. And if you're at a high school level, you probably are trying to balance between competitive and recreational. If you're in a collegiate athlete, perspective, you might be balanced between, so hopefully you have some high performance athletes and then you have some competitive ones, right? But I think, you probably can't have a culture where you have high performance and you have people that are purely recreational that are like show up with it and they're inconsistent and all that. It's probably really, really difficult to pull that off. But I think for us, the challenge as coaches is to create an environment where we know there's a minimum standard for whatever that is, whether it's our recreational athletes in a team or there's our competitive athletes in a team, and that we are trying to make that clear and then accept those people and then work with our maybe high performing athletes or the ones that are working harder so that they can accept those people. For that, we need all shapes and sizes. We need all levels of commitment on this team between that range. So know what your range is and then try to embrace everyone has a spot within that range.
I think related to that, JP, is just valuing the roles of all of those players, right? Like very few of us are blessed to have, in the basketball context, 7 players that are going to go to the NBA, right? And we don't need those players that are maybe less committed. Most of us are working with players who have varying level of commitments, and that might be because of their commitments to another sport, for example. And one thing we've tried to lean into over the years is that if you do have players that are football guys, and just really when they come back to the basketball team, for example, a lot of times they miss a couple weeks of practice there, that you're able to honor those guys for their postseason in football and have, like celebrate what they did for the school and community, even though the rest of us were still working on basketball, and kind of have almost sort of a ceremony or a ritual or a welcoming back into the basketball fold so that there isn't this animosity of, well, we've been grinding for 2 weeks. Well, you guys have been running around and, doing victory parades, and now you're behind and you're not in basketball shape. And there are some natural inherent conflicts that sometimes can arise from that. And I think as coaches, if we make a intentional effort to embrace the value and the role of all of those players and explain how we have to have all of them in order to be successful, that helps to create and establish a model for the players themselves to follow when they're trying to process, well, why is JP going to football lifting instead of coming to basketball open gym? Like we kind of accept that's what the choice that they've made, and they still have value to us, and we're happy when we see them here.
I was going to say, JP, I think the only environment where I've seen the high performance athlete and the rec athlete exist on the same team is in the adult sports leagues that I've played in, where it's like, man, why are you going so hard? Like we're here to have fun. And someone's like, yeah, it's too intense. You mentioned the word acceptance. And I think that's a great starting point when we're talking about different levels of commitment, whether it's as a coach or as one of those high performance players. Often there is a lot of judgment, criticism, blame, and energy spent on those that do not have the same level of commitment or investment as we do. And I think often of a conversation I had with Sue Enquist, who won 10 national championships coaching softball at UCLA. She was there at the same time as Coach Wooden. Papa Wooden is how she referred to him. And he came by her office one day and he said, you can't pass a moral judgment on them being the players, for not loving it the way that you do. And she said, I absolutely was. Like, I could not understand why they would even, glance at their watch during practice, because they're on my time. We're here. We're doing softball, right? So it's like she actually threw a kid's watch over the fence of practice once. She's like, Betsy, where were you when I was coaching? Because that was not my best moment. So I say all that. Acceptance is good. Can we move towards appreciation? Because acceptance is it can be passive for some people. Like, yeah, I've accepted you're not as committed as I am, but I still have judgment about it. If we have appreciation, if we're leaning into gratitude, that judgment tends to dissipate. So can I appreciate the teammate that is not as committed as I am for what value they add to our team? even if it's just perspective, like they've got other things that are bigger things going on. Gosh, what a great reminder for me as a high performance athlete that, hey, my world isn't all just this. Yes, I've created that environment for myself, but maybe having a larger perspective would benefit me in my high performance pursuits. So I think, can we minimize judgment by working through acceptance to get to appreciation? And then as coaches and athletes, invest our time accordingly. Invest in those that want to get better, that are driven in the way that adds value to the team. Because a lot of times I see coaches invest in those that they wish were more committed. And it's like, yeah, that's not moving the needle, and it's draining your energy from giving to those that are with you.
I think one of the judgment things that comes up a lot, though, Betsy, is players will express a goal. I want to play college sports. I want to win a championship. And then we go, yeah, but your behaviors align with your goals. And we come in with all this judgment and we rip them for that. And I get what we're trying to expose there. We're trying to help them to have awareness that they're not on track for their goals. And yet I think it's recognizing that one of the great questions that you can ask anybody in a coaching context is when someone expresses a goal or a commitment of like, hey, I'm going to start shooting every morning at 6 a.m., or do this type of workout. It's just say, okay, that's great. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like, you're really, really super committed to that. And a 1 being, you're not really that committed. Where are you? And I think sometimes just having people put a number on it allows them to articulate that to themselves and to you, that like, oh, like I am committed to this, but if something else comes up that sounds better that day, then yeah, I probably might drop that. Right. I think, and I had a coach recently that had a player not show up to an off-season workout. They just expressed the coach they want to be a college player. They said they were, really committed, is what they said, to these workouts. They could be that player, and then they didn't show up, and the coach like lost his mind because he was like, "What? You said you were committed, and you wanted me to hold you accountable." And the girl's like, "Yeah, but like I had my cousin in town, and I want to go spend time with her, right?" And it became a real learning moment for that coach, where he's just like, "Oh, okay." And I think that comes back to your judgment. I mean, when the player misses practice for the grandma's 80th, or the kid wants to go on the ski trip, or they want to go on the summer family trip to wherever that is that their family gets to go to, or the multi-sport athlete, or the kid that misses off-season workouts, whatever it be, it's just like you said. I think it was the best point that I heard there was just invest in the ones that are there, right? The ones that are showing up. All right, that wraps up today's episode. We'll be back in the next episode for the second part of this Ask Us Anything. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with some other leaders, and be sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, if you want to go deeper, if you actually want to train yourself on how to create an extraordinary culture, you might want to consider the TOC Transformational Coach and Culture Certification. For more information about this certification, this training, and all our online courses, go to tocculture.com, and don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter there as well, so you get the notes to this and every episode.